Good morning, folks. Welcome to the Buzz Breakfast. We're going to give it just a minute longer for everybody to join in. Still see the numbers coming up. Good morning. We're so glad you could join us. I think we'll get started. Good morning again. Welcome. I know we have a few more people coming in. They'll probably trickle in for the next 5 minutes or so, but that's quite all right. Thank you for joining us this morning. I think we have a wonderful program set up all about the election 2020. Big election that's coming up in less than 70 days, 60 something days now, I think. Really thankful that we have some wonderful people here. Before we jump in, I want to again thank our co-presenting sponsors, Dixon Hughes Goodman and the Van Winkle Law Firm. We have with us this morning Dennis Theodosius from Dixon Hughes Goodman, who's a tax partner there in their Asheville office. He focuses on tax consulting and compliance for small and mid-sized businesses and their owners, as well as large audited clients operating primarily in manufacturing and real estate industries. Dennis, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ed. As he mentioned, I am Dennis Theodosius, a tax partner at DHG here in our Asheville office. I want to send a big thank you to the Leadership Asheville crew. They've done a great job pivoting in this virtual environment. And also want to say thank you to our friends at Van Winkle for co-sponsoring us with us this year. I hope everyone finds themselves safe and healthy today, given our current environment. I am very excited about the upcoming panel. I think that our speakers have some great topics to share that are going to be really relevant to our community on a local, state, and national level very soon. And speaking of community, I just wanted to touch on our community and the community of Western North Carolina, as I really feel that it is part of what makes DHG Asheville special. Many of you may know, but DHG is a regional firm now. We've grown to be a top 20 accounting firm in the country. And our roots are strongly entrenched in Western North Carolina, as one of our founders, Ken Hughes, started his first firm here in Western North Carolina. At this point, my colleagues and I have an opportunity to work and practice in other cities across the country: Charlotte, Atlanta, DC, New York City, and many times we do. But I think part of what makes DHG Asheville special is that we've chosen this office, we've chosen this area, and part of that is the community of Western North Carolina. So with that, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to sponsor Leadership Asheville, and thank you all for attending, and I'll kick it back over to Ed.
Awesome. Thanks, Dennis. I really appreciate it. We appreciate your support from you and the Van Winkle Law Firm. Few other people that I need to thank before we get started this morning. Our platinum sponsors. These folks have been really wonderful this year with us. Started out sponsoring tables both at the Winter Buzz Breakfast that we started this past winter, but continued through the summer even though we went virtual. So really big shout out to Explore Asheville, Parsec Financial, Western Carolina University, and UNC Asheville. They continue to support us, and we really appreciate that. And our sustaining sponsors really sponsor the whole program. They do a year-long sponsorship and have been doing this for quite some time. Supports all the programs we run: TD Bank, Waste Pro, USA, and the Van Winkle Law Firm. So very grateful for their help and support as we continue to move forward. And our community partners who do a great job because they do an in-kind donation: Blue Ridge Public Radio, Asheville FM, Radio, the Crown Plaza Resort, Great Line Trolleys, and the YMCA Blue Ridge Assembly out in Black Mountain. We're really thankful for their help and support as we continue. And I'd be remiss if I didn't again thank our buzz planning team who worked overtime this year, switching and planning multiple different programs as we went from hopefully an in-person to a virtual to all kind of different things. But Jesse Fry, Michelle Keenan, Elise Lewis, and Austin Pullison did just a fabulous job. So thanks, guys. I appreciate that. And then today's panel, very excited to look forward to some comments here. We have Dr. Chris Cooper, Department Head of Political Science and Public Affairs at Western Carolina University, and Corinne Duncan, the Director of Election Services at Buncombe County, talking about all things election related. I know there's lots of questions. We are thrilled because typically we have Dr. Cooper come in and talk to our flagship program, the Leadership Asheville class, every year around Government Day to sort of give the lay of the land. And Dr. Cooper has been studying politics, particularly in this area for, I don't know, decades, could be. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chris first and just kind of get a lay of the land. People hear that we are a swing state. You know, what does that actually mean? And what does the numbers look like right now? And so let me turn it over to you, just let you kick off and start.
Great. Well, thanks, Ed. This is one of my favorite groups to talk to, although half of that is just that I like to talk to Jan and Ed, so it gets me an opportunity to do that. But I'm happy to be here virtually, and I'm going to try to share my screen here. My host has disabled my screen sharing.
Oh, let me change that real quickly.
Although was probably smart to do that before.
Now try that.
All right. How about that? How does that look, Ed?
That's looking good here.
All right. Sorry about the momentary movement here. All right. And hey, eventually we will start this darn thing. All right. So I want to talk about 20 minutes today, just about the 2020 election in general, kind of what I'm seeing. Before I pass it off to Corinne, where we'll hear a lot more about the nuts and bolts of what's happening in Buncombe County and election administration, which I think is so key, right? We all kind of nationally with Bush v. Gore said, hey, wait a second, maybe the way we run elections is actually like an important thing to talk about. And I think we've all been reminded of that this season as well. So I'm really excited that she's here. I'm excited that I get to learn. I would be logging into this to hear from her if I wasn't a panelist. So I'm really happy about that. And here we go. All right. So what I want to talk about today is just a little bit of a voter registration snapshot, statewide mostly, but I do want to give you a little sense of Buncombe County. Talk just briefly about the Congressional and General Assembly races in general, no pun intended, just to see what we might be expecting. And then talk a little bit about what's different in 2020. And there I'll give you kind of a sense of absentee vote by mail thus far before I pass it on. So that's kind of the rough agenda. What I'm really hoping is that we can have some questions and some discussion at the end. That's definitely the most valuable part for me. And I know we have kind of heterogeneous concerns from folks about different things you'd like to hear about. So I do encourage you to weigh in on those, please. And at the end of this, I have my email, and if there's things we don't get to talk about that you're curious about, please drop me a note. I'd be more than happy to get in a longer communication with folks. Like everybody, I'm juggling a couple little kids right now, so I just, excuse any misspellings or typos. And the response is back.
And Chris, if I could just jump in real quick and just remind people that, yes, we want their questions, and we're using the Q&A box. So if you have any questions for our panelists today, please type them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Thanks.
Thank you. So just to start off and give you guys a sense of where we are in North Carolina, and you might see a couple of things that hopefully will surprise you if you don't follow this stuff every day, like I know a few folks on the call do. And I know there's a lot of lines going on here, so let me try to walk you guys through them. This is just, I took the North Carolina voter file for a number of different years, which fortunately, thanks to our great State Board of Elections, is available for download for anybody with these at Wi-Fi speed these days. And so I've arrayed voter registration in North Carolina from 1977 to the present. And the top line, the solid line, is the percent of the voting population in North Carolina that are Democrats. The middle line, starts off middle and then dips down. The kind of longer dash is percent Republican. And then the bottom one that edges up with sort of increasing frequency is unaffiliated. And I'll walk you through that in a second, but these vertical lines are also important for this story. So the first vertical line in 1988 is when Republicans opened up their primaries to unaffiliated. I'll explain that. And then the second one in 96 is the first time Democrats did so. So essentially, we were, like all Southern states, dominated by the Democratic Party for a long time. So I've got a version of this graph going back to like 1908, and the line for Democrat is way higher even before. We had pockets of Republicans in the western part of the state, but for the most part, we were a Democratic stronghold. And you start to see, like you did across the South, this kind of Democratic number decline over time. That part is fairly normal. What's interesting is prior to 77 in North Carolina, we didn't have this unaffiliated category. You could be an independent, there were a few third parties, but there was no true unaffiliated. We created unaffiliated in North Carolina in the late 70s, but if you were unaffiliated, you could not vote in a primary. So not surprisingly, very few people chose that option. In 1987, the Republicans got really smart and they said, hey, wait a second, we're kind of hurting on this voter registration issue. What if we open our primaries up to these unaffiliated voters? And so you can see unaffiliated started to creep up starting in the 1988 election when the Republicans opened up. And then it was increasing and increasing, and you can see the kind of big decline in Democrats over this time period. The Democrats finally in 95, starting with the 96 election, got smart and said, hey, why don't we open up our primaries to these unaffiliated voters as well? They didn't want to do it. There's all this kind of interesting backstory if you want to geek out and read the Citizen Times from those years. But once that happened, the floodgates opened and unaffiliated increased in bigger and bigger numbers. And so starting in September 2017, unaffiliated became the second largest category in North Carolina politics, right? So today, the parts you really care about, Democrat has the lead, then unaffiliated, then Republican. In many counties throughout the state, unaffiliated is already the largest group. So I'm talking to you today from Western's main campus in Cullowhee in Jackson County. Unaffiliated is the largest category in Jackson County. You're probably listening to me from Buncombe County. Unaffiliated is the largest category in Buncombe County. You're saying, hey, I'm the weirdo from Henderson County, same thing. Madison County, same thing. So the West actually leads the way in unaffiliated registration in the state. So I think this is a pattern to watch. We can talk more about why it's important, why it's not important later on, but I think it's important. I think it for a whole host of reasons. Who are these unaffiliated voters? They tend to be much younger. So all I did here was just grab party identification by age in North Carolina. So starting at 17, when you can pre-register, and then anybody that was 101 or older, I called the same category. So apologies to the people that are 103 here, and I'm calling you 101. But what you'll see is that young people are the real driver of this unaffiliated. It's also in-migrants to the state, but young people in particular. So until age 45, unaffiliated is the largest category. Only at 45 does this start to flip. Okay, so unaffiliated is this line here that starts off at the top. You can see people at the end of the lifespan, very few of them have chosen unaffiliated. Okay, so you can also see at the end of the lifespan, Democrat is by far the largest category. For the folks that are registering for the first time because they're coming of age, neither party has a large advantage right at the beginning. All the Democrats do start to have a bigger advantage, which then closes in midlife. So all this is to say this unaffiliated thing isn't just a flash in the pan. It is It is increasing in prominence over time. I think it has become a more important feature of North Carolina politics. And then to Ed's point at the beginning, I think this is one of the many ways that illustrates why we're such a swing state. So if anybody's really curious, send me an email. I just had a little piece in the London School of Economics blog about why North Carolina is a swing state, where I go into it in more detail. But this party registration and the fact that neither party has a clear advantage is certainly one piece of it. A little bit more about party registration and kind of what happened in this unaffiliated rise. For a long time, I've been looking at the young folks coming of age and then folks moving to our state and how they're registering, how they're voting. And in the last year, I got really interested in these party switchers. So it turns out you can switch parties, as Corinne knows well, in North Carolina. You can do it with incredible frequency. So there's one person in our state who I figured out from the voter file has actually switched his party registration. I think it's 88 times over the last decade. So like every time I go for a bike ride, this guy decides to switch his party affiliation. Most people don't do it nearly that often, obviously, but party switching is increasing over time. So there's been about 1 million switches over the last decade, people that have changed parties. Sometimes, again, it's like this guy that did it 88 times, but usually it's people who are doing it once. You can see the dash line is just, all I did was just smooth this out. The up and down line is the actual trend. And what I hope you're picking up from that is that it goes up in election years. So not surprisingly, all these get out the vote efforts, candidates that are getting people to switch parties are encouraging people to switch parties, not getting them to. That does happen a lot more during even years, election years, when we're paying more attention to what's happening in politics. So where are these party switchers switching to? So I just figured out the net gain or loss. So if you're below, this is actually a good one for a day sponsored partially by an accounting firm, right? So essentially I just figured out losses and gains. And if you're above zero, of course, your party gained. If you're below zero, your party lost. And you don't have to be an accountant to figure out that, boy, that dim line is going down and that the unaffiliated line is going up. In other words, unaffiliated is the biggest recipient of these party switchers. Democrat is the biggest loser. I won't go into this in any more detail. If anybody wants to email me, I'll be happy to send them kind of more analysis of what happens to these folks and how often they do it and all that kind of thing. But the important part, I think, for understanding our state's politics is, again, this unaffiliated group is growing in numbers. Some do pass through unaffiliated on the way to Republican, but as you'll see, Republican's not the big gainer here, right? About 25,000 voters in party switching, not the one that really matters. It really is unaffiliated that's been gaining in big numbers in our state. So what about Buncombe County? What's happening here? And I know Corinne can talk in a lot more detail and granularity about how the ballots are cast and how all this happens. But I did want to give you a sense or a little flavor for how Buncombe compares to the rest of the state, since we're at the Leadership Asheville buzz. And so again, unaffiliated is growing everywhere in the state, but Buncombe County is leading the way. Now, if you're a member of either one of the major parties, this isn't really leading the way, right? Maybe you should be a little scared about this, but you can see unaffiliated is the largest group here in Buncombe County. And I guess this other thing I draw your attention to is the from North Carolina piece. So overall in the state of North Carolina, about 50% of North Carolina registered voters are from the state of North Carolina. They were born here, in other words, and that number is considerably lower in Buncombe County, which probably doesn't surprise anybody. Well, of course, it's less African-American than the rest of the state as well. So we'll talk just briefly about the congressional race. I'm guessing there'll be some in the Q&A about that. I'd love to talk about that. We do have an interesting congressional race that we'll get into. Of course, our maps have been redrawn very recently. So if you won't go through the whole history of that, but of course, we're in the 11th congressional district. If you're on this call, almost certainly, you can see what the new lines are going to look like. I believe Buncombe County Board of Elections is actually now set the candidates. And so one thing we know for sure now is that we will not have a member of the 11th congressional district representing us from the time Mark Meadows retired or resigned, became Trump's chief of staff, depending on how you want to talk about the action verb there, all the way through January. So we're going to have a very large time. We're not going to have a special election. Our governor chose not to call a special election for this 11th congressional district. So we don't have representation right now, but this is what the map looks like in general. And so what people want to talk about, of course, is how did this map change things? And I'm just going to give you one real quick indicator of that. So I'm about to put up a table that's got too many numbers on it, but I'll try to draw your attention, since we don't have much time, just briefly to the part I want you to pay attention to. And then you can look later at the details of this if you want. So all I did was just grab the percent that went for Trump in various districts in the state before and after redistricting. And so if you just look at the change column there, negative, of course, is lost Trump vote or became more Democratic or less Republican. Positive is became more Republican or more of a Trump vote. And if you see the 11th congressional district here moved about 6 percentage points away from President Trump, but it is still a district that voted about 57% of the time. About 57% of voters in our district, the 11th, the new 11th, voted for Donald Trump. So it is a Republican district. It used to be the most Republican district in the state. It is now about the 6th most Republican district in the state. And my metric there, again, is Trump vote. So we, of course, have two candidates here, right? We've got Mo Davis, we've got Madison Cawthorn tonight at 9:45, I think. Madison Cawthorn will be speaking at the Republican National Convention. So this is going to be, I think, a watched race, an interesting race in all sorts of ways that we can get into. We've, of course, at our state legislative level, our General Assembly, these lines have been redrawn. They didn't affect the far west, but they did affect Buncombe County and some other parts of western North Carolina. Right, our new state Senate maps and our new state House maps, 50 members of our Senate, 120 members of our House, way too many to go into. The markers to watch, right, are the majority and the supermajority. So, of course, the majority, 50% plus one, and the supermajority means that they can override the governor's veto, right? So that is a key marker. The Republicans used to have supermajority control. They now just have majority control. What do we see? I've been spent a lot of time looking at these individual races across the state. I would say the odds of the Republicans regaining the supermajority are low. The odds of the Democrats gaining it are essentially nil. The kind of light odds, I would say, are the Republicans will hold on to the majority, but I think there is the potential for some movement towards the Democratic side, particularly if there's a larger wave. So talk about what's different in 2020 and hand over, since I know we're getting tight on time. So what's different in 2020? Coronavirus, of course, is driving everything we're thinking about as citizens, is people, right? Right now, my kids are somewhere between my wife and my office, like a lot of y'all, but of course, it's driving elections. So one thing I've been thinking about that I won't have any slides about is the youth vote in this, and the college vote in particular. My column in the Citizen Times on Sunday, I think, is going to talk about the difficulties of the get out the vote efforts when college students don't know exactly where they're going to be in November. As a student of mine told me the other day, I can't volunteer at the polls on campus if I don't know if I'm going to be on campus in November. So I think that means something for poll workers, which, of course, are not the youngest folks in the world, shall we say, on average, but it also means something for how these folks are going to vote. So I think that's one thing that's different. And the other one is one I know Corinne's going to talk about, and so I'll just hand off in just a minute to her, is absentee vote by mail. This is not my graph, but it's by Grace Panetta, who's a reporter who covers a lot of this. The big point I want you to take away from this is this line way out here at 60, the one that kind of sticks out. That's North Carolina. We're the first state in the country to send out ballots. So September 4th, as we'll hear more about, ballots are going to start to go out in North Carolina. We're the first ones in the country. Expect a lot of attention about that. At this point, though, people can request absentee by mail ballots. And so all this graph is just a percent of the registered voters who have requested absentee by mail ballots. We don't know if they're going to return them. We don't know what percentage they're going to return them. We just know who's requesting them as the county boards report this to the state system. Buncombe has been a leader on the reporting. Not all of our counties in West North Carolina have been leaders on reporting, so feel good if you're in Buncombe County. But what I want you to see here, these are just the states that have the largest percentage of registered voters who have requested. And you'll see a lot of familiar faces in Western North Carolina, right? So yeah, you've got Orange and Chatham on the high end and Wake, but Polk, Henderson, Transylvania, Macon, Haywood, Buncombe, we've got a lot of the West being represented above the state average. So right now the state average is about 6% of registered voters have requested absentee by mail ballots. So what does all this mean? What do we know? We know it's way up. So about 13 times as many people have requested absentee by mail ballots statewide as did the same day in 2016, that should say, I apologize. So 13 times the same day in 2020 as 2016. So 13 times increase. We also know that there's a partisan asymmetry, which is just political science speak for one party's doing it more than the other. So traditionally, there's not a lot of partisan difference between who requests absentee by mail in North Carolina, but Democrats are up way more than Republicans. So everybody's up. Democrats are up like super much. Unaffiliated in the middle, Republican on the bottom. I think it's important to know we don't know. We don't know the specifics of who's requesting this. Thanks to some shenanigans that happened a couple of years ago, the state has taken away our ability to see exactly who requests these, which I think is a smart move. We don't know whether they're the same voters or new voters. So if they're the same, it could just be that we're replacing the way we vote, or it could be we're creating new voters. We just don't know yet. We don't know whether the return rates will be constant. So in 2016, about 86% of people who requested ballots statewide returned those ballots absentee. We don't know what that's going to look like. And of course, we don't know whether these patterns will persist or whether we've kind of just front-loaded when people get these ballots. So big takeaways from my mind, we're a swing state. Party registration patterns are very interesting right now. Party switching is driving more of that than you might think. We've got some interesting races, and then absentee vote by mail really is kind of a difference maker this time. So with that, I will hope Ed will take my screen off, and we'll pass the torch.
And Chris, before you go though,
Yeah.
We had one question that came in on your earlier slide. You were showing percentages of voters, whether Democrat, Republican, or unaffiliated. Yep. One of the questions is there analysis of the percentage of registered voters who actually are voting?
Percentage of there is, and I did not put that up here for what percentage of registered voters in the last election have voted, right? It obviously varies based on which election you're talking about. But yeah, so those numbers are just, it's a really good point, just overall numbers. I will say this unaffiliated, it's not like these are folks who just aren't voting. They're still being represented in the voting population as well. So it's a really good question.
Great. And keep the questions coming in on the Q&A chat. I've also put Dr. Cooper's email address in the chat box so you can copy that, and thank you. And at that, we're going to turn it over to Corinne. Corinne?
Hello, everybody. I wish I could see you all. It'd be nice to see everybody, but thank you for joining us today. And what I'm going to do is we'll talk about absentee first because there's a lot of interest in that. And then I'm going to go over the general voting process and options. And then I think, as Chris said earlier, that opening it up to questions will really get some engagement. So we talked a lot about absentee. And to give a context of what's happening in Buncombe County, in 2016, total requests for the entire election was about 7,500. So about that many people requested absentee ballots. At this time right now, we estimate that we have 25,000 requests in Buncombe County. So that is a very, very big increase, and we have 200,000 registered voters. So we're dealing with that. We've increased our staff to be able to process this many, and but yes, it's a very big number. I wanted to go over how you request an absentee ballot because there are different information out there right now about how things work. So in North Carolina, anyone can request an absentee ballot, but you do have to request one. So there has been some rumor about people thinking that the state was going to send everybody a ballot automatically, and that's not going to happen. You still have to request one. There have been many groups who are sending out request forms, which is totally legitimate. Many people got request forms from the Center for Voter Information. I got 2 so far, and that's perfectly fine. You can use those forms as long as it's the North Carolina form. And I do want to point out that with this really high volume and our relatively small staff, make sure that you only submit one form. So if you get a second one in the mail, it's not because there's anything wrong. If you submitted one, you're fine, we're taking care of you. You don't need to submit another one. And groups are going to, we don't have control over whether groups are sending out these request forms, so you're probably going to get more. And in fact, in mid-September, the State Board of Elections is going to send out a request form to the entire state. So you will definitely be seeing one from them. So we've got this large amount of requests coming in. We're processing them as quickly as possible. Requests are, as Chris said, are not public. You won't get a notice that we received the request. So don't be worried about that. Again, we're taking care of you. If you're sending it in, we're getting it and processing it. On the 4th of September is when the first round of ballots will get out. Now, normally during elections, we are able to get all the ballots that have been requested up to that point out on the 4th. And we are still aiming to do that, but 25,000 is a lot of envelopes for us to stuff and get out in the mail. So we're going to do our best to get them out as quickly as possible. You've also heard about slowdowns in the post office. And so I would wait about 2 weeks before you get worried that you haven't received a ballot if you've requested one. So give us a little bit of time. But if you haven't received one by then, feel free to give us a call. We are definitely here to help you with those kind of things. Absentee ballots, once they come in, we have questions about ballot security, right? So once ballots come in, we check them in, and an elections official checks these in. So there's 2 ways that you can return an absentee ballot. You can do so by mail, and we encourage you to do that early, especially this year, to make sure that they get here on time. And you can also drop them off in person. You can do that at our office, and starting on September 4th, we'll have a dedicated line where you can come and drop off your ballot and not have to go through the regular, our regular reception. So you'll be able to do that. And if you choose to, you can drop off your ballot at any early voting site. And we're going to have 16 early voting locations all across the county. We've got larger locations than normal this year so that we can make sure that we're adhering to social distancing. You will have to wait in line with the voters if you choose to drop off your ballot at early voting. There's not going to be a special absentee drop off at early voting sites. If you want that, come and drop it off at our office. Once ballots come in, they're checked in. So if you're dropping them off in person, make sure that you are checking it in with an elections official. That person is going to check in the ballot, and that will mark you as voted. So you won't be able to go vote at early voting or on election day. And you'll also have to sign a log. So if that's not happening, then you're probably not giving your ballot to the right person. You make sure that you're giving it to an elections official. Once the ballots are checked in, they get reviewed by our staff, and then they get submitted at a board meeting. And at that board meeting, the board also looks at all of them and make sure that the signature looks like it's from the voter, that the ID matches, that we have the witness requirement. There's one witness requirement for 2020. And then the board approves, and then that's when the ballots get counted. And there's a difference between counting and results. Results are tabulated and released only on election day. But once that happens, you'll be able to go to your voter lookup and see whether your ballot was approved or not. So that's the process of absentee by mail.
Corinne?
Yes.
Just, sorry, this is Ed. Just there's a question that came in that fits right in there. Is as they're checking it in, if a voter sends in a form that's filled out incorrectly, will the Board of Elections contact the individual to help them fix the error?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a fantastic question. So if there's an error in anything, if there's an error in the request form, we will call you and we will send out another one if needed to let you know that there was an issue. That's
Great.
a great.
And likewise, if the ballot for some reason is rejected and not approved, will they be notified?
Yes. So if there was a issue with not signing, you didn't have a witness, you will get a letter from us that tells you what was wrong, how to correct it, and we'll send you another ballot out so that you can make that correction as soon as possible.
Good. And I think you mentioned, because there's a question about where does voter ID stand right now. And so if I understand correctly, with the absentee ballot, there is a witness that somebody has to witness your signature. Yes. When you sign your absentee ballot. And how about in person, if you're going to the polls, where do we stand on voter ID?
There's no voter ID at the polls. Great. That legislation has been put on hold.
Great, thanks. Sorry about that.
No, these questions, this is what it's about. I like the questions. So that's absentee by mail in a nutshell. So I wanted to go over all of the other types of voting to see if we prompt any questions there. And then I will talk about some ways that you can help us. So first, we want to get ready for this election. And you want to do three things. First, make sure you're registered. Do that if you're not. Second, sample ballots came out yesterday. So you can go on our website to the voter lookup tool, type in your name, find your name in the list and click on your name. This is a state tool and I think it's a little bit difficult to see. You know, you get this list of names and it feels like, oh, it's a confirmation that I'm registered. But if you click on your name, you get a lot more information. It tells you about your election day polling location. It has your voting history. It has your address. So you can confirm a lot of things there. And you can look up your sample ballot. And that's pretty exciting for us right now because that really makes the election real. People can go in and see what they're actually going to vote on. They can do their research and be prepared to vote. And that's an important thing usually, and especially this time when if you're going to vote in person, you don't want to spend a lot of time in the polls, so you want to make sure that you are prepared when you go. So look up your sample ballot and be ready. And then thirdly, you need to choose how you're going to vote. And in Buncombe County and all across North Carolina, there's 3 ways to vote. Absentee by mail, which we just talked about extensively and is definitely increased. We have early voting, and in Buncombe County, we have a very strong early voting program. The State Board of Elections, this election required that the entire state have a early voting location per 20,000 voters at least. And we have 16 locations, so that's about per 12,000 voters. So we have a lot of early voting sites for our population. We've also chosen really large sites. One example, our biggest example of that is that we have the Harris Cherokee, the Civic Center this year. So that'll be a big location for early voting. Early voting is 17 days long. It starts October 15th and it goes through October 31st. Hours are 8:30 in the morning, or sorry, 8 o'clock in the morning to 7:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. We're going to be open both Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 3 p.m. And then the last Saturday, the hours are a little bit extended. We start at 8 a.m. and go to 3 p.m. So there's a long period of early voting for you all to go to. Also in Buncombe County, which is very convenient during the pandemic, is that we have a wait map. So you can go online and look at all 16 locations anytime during early voting and see how many people are waiting in line. So you can go to a site where there's not a lot of people. All right, so that's early voting. On election day, you can of course vote in person on election day, and you need to do that at your precinct. So we have 80 precincts in Buncombe County, and you can find your precinct also by going online to that voter lookup tool. That's what I recommend really people get familiar with because it has so much information in general. You can always call our office though if you need help or don't have access to a computer. So those are the 3 ways to vote. And I'll end this and then open it up to questions in ways that you can help us. So the first thing is do what you're doing right now and learn what's real. learn the correct information and spread it. That really will help us. Second, if you're going to vote by absentee, just submit 1 request. Like I said, so you only need to do 1. If an agency is sending you a second one and you've already done it, you don't need to do it again. We're taking care of you. You can also be a poll worker. And we've got 2 types of poll workers. We have the early voting poll workers, and they get paid by the hour for their 17-day commitment. And there's 2 shifts during the day, so you wouldn't be working those long hours. And that is $12 an hour minimum, unless you commit to being what we call a captain who oversees the location, and then you get paid a little bit more. And you also get paid to go to training as an early voting poll worker. You can also be an election day poll worker, and those are flat rate pay. And that starts at $175 if you're an assistant. And then if you take the chief judge position, it's $260 for that day. You will also need to go to training, and you'll need to set up the polling location the night before. So it is definitely some responsibility, but a great service to your community, especially now during COVID. And then we also have some other opportunities. We have what's called MAT teams all across the state, and these are multi-partisan assistance teams. These are people who go out and help people in the community at long-term care facilities and help them request absentee ballots and vote those absentee ballots. So we need teams of people who are willing to go to those locations when they're requested and help those people. And we are, from the Department of Health of the state, are following all guidelines to help both our people and the people at these facilities be safe. All this would be conducted outside. We work individually with each facility to make sure that we're helping these people and being safe for everyone. We also have a few volunteer positions this time around. And if you are interested in that and can do a relatively steady schedule, please give us a call and let us know about that. And these are positions that you don't need to have a computer access for. So we have a lot of mail right now, so we need people helping us open the mail and sort it and that sort of thing. And any of these positions, you can call us at 828-250-4200. And on our website, we also have a form for poll workers to submit an application, and we'll get back to you that way.
Great. Got a number of questions for you too. I'll keep going.
I have one more thing, and then I really do love the questions. So the other thing is that you know, we are getting a lot of, and Chris alluded to this, we are getting a lot of absentee requests, but I suspect that there is a good number of these of people who have submitted the request because they're not sure how they're going to vote. And so, you know, that's totally fine. You can submit the request, you can get the ballot, and you can decide to vote in person. If you do that, don't take that ballot, the absentee ballot, to a polling location, early voting or election day to vote it. That ballot gets destroyed and you vote a ballot at that location. So, you know, make sure that you're doing that. And then you get marked as voted in that way, and that other ballot would not count. That said, I do think that despite the very, very large absentee numbers, I do think that we have a lot of interest in early voting. And so we always have a very big increase in voting on that last Saturday from 8 to 3. Always, it's a very, very big increase. But at 3 o'clock, we have to audit and turn around all that data to be loaded onto our election day computers before the next day. And that is a huge task for us. And so if you're gonna vote early, maybe not choose that last Saturday would be fantastic for us. It will help things. So those are ways that you can help. And yes, I'd love to take questions now.
Awesome. Well, we've got quite a few of them for you. First of all, what if you unknowingly send in more than one request for an absentee ballot?
That's okay. It slows us down. We get the request, we take a look at it, we make sure that there weren't any intended changes. You know, maybe you decide, oh, I want it sent to a different address. So we check to make sure that there wasn't something that you really did want to change. If there is, we change it. If not, we save it as a duplicate request. So we'll show that you had to request, but that's fine. It just adds extra processing for us.
Great. And if the absentee ballot is rejected, can the person still go and vote at early voting or on election day?
If the board rejects the absentee, you will show as voted. No, I don't. Let me get back to you on that question.
Okay.
It depends on why it was rejected. I do believe, let me get back to you on that.
Okay.
Sorry,
all right. That's fine. Yeah, that's right. We can put that in there. And there was another question that you had mentioned that all voters are going to receive an absentee ballot request form from the county. Is that true?
Not from the county. It's coming from the State Board of Elections.
Oh, right. From the State Board of Elections. So yes, they will get one way or the other. They'll get a request form.
A request form, not a ballot. Remember,
right,
you have to request it to get a ballot. But yes, everyone will be getting one, and that's in what's called the judicial mailing, and that happens every presidential election in mid-September. So it'll have all kinds of information about statewide voting in there, as well as the absentee request form. I believe it'll have a registration form as well, but the registration deadline is October 8th.
Okay. And what's the deadline for absentee ballot? Is it counted only if it's received by the election day, or is it counted if it's postmarked by the election day?
So we'll go back up a little bit. Absentee ballot requests are due on October 27th. Absentee ballots must be to us if you turn them in person by election day. If you mail them, it has to be postmarked on election day. However, there's a cutoff date. So if it's postmarked on election day, we have to receive it within 3 days for it to be able to count. And that's an important point because of the slowdown in the post office. You know, you don't want to be mailing it on election day. Make sure that you mail your ballot earlier than that or turn it into us directly.
Gotcha. And you had mentioned earlier about you can drop off your absentee ballot at an early voting site or at your office. Can someone drop off their spouse's completed ballot or their neighbor's ballot?
They cannot drop off their neighbors, but a near relative, yes, and a spouse counts. They will have to sign a log that says that they were that person.
Okay. I'm not sure if Lillian put in there that in the chat box the website for the weight map for early voting. If we have that, we can drop that in the chat box, would be terrific.
So that populates when early voting starts.
Right.
Yes, and so that on October 15th is the first time that that will be available. It'll be a button on the homepage of our website, and it's on in the early voting tab of our website.
And is there anything that we're doing, Western North Carolina is doing to prepare for that potential impact of the slower post office stuff, other than just mail it early?
Yeah, just, you know, we don't have control over the postal system. We know that they're working hard too. They've been in contact with us about volume, and we're communicating, and we're making sure that we're picking up every day. We always have done that, but it's just a very, very high volume. And so we just need to be proactive and make sure that we mail early or take advantage of in-person drop-off.
Great. And do you have to be a Buncombe County resident to be on the MAP team?
I believe so. I can get back to you on that one too, because you have to be appointed by the board now.
And for folks that are, because we do have folks calling in from Cullowhee and Haywood and Madison, do other Western North Carolina counties have these same teams and those needs?
Yes, every single county has a MAP team. It's one of the things that are required by law. So we're all available to do that.
And are they compensated?
Yes, and that differs by county. We pay $12 an hour plus mileage.
Great. Are there opportunities to be a backup poll worker?
Yes, definitely.
Where do they find out about those?
Yep, same thing. You can just apply to be a poll worker when you get in touch with one of us, and we have a team of 4 recruiters right now recruiting poll workers. Just let them know that that's what you're interested in. And I'm really glad someone is interested in that, because that's something, as we get close to the day, we do have a lot of dropouts. And so it's great to have people interested in just being a backup.
And what's the timeline for involvement as a poll worker, and when's the training?
So for early voting, that happens first. So training happens first, and that starts on September 14th. You do half a day of training for a full day of training for early voting. And you'll get to choose those dates. If you're brand new, we are going to require that do that in person. We have a very large room to keep everybody socially distanced, but we feel that you need to work with the equipment and see your supplies and all of that stuff. If you are a veteran, we have a virtual option for that. For election day, you do half a day of training. That starts on September 24th, and we have a variety of sessions that you can sign up for. Same deal with that, the in-person and virtual training, depending on your experience. Then you will have to set up on the night before the election. So the Monday before the election, you'll go to your polling location, meet with your chief judge and the judges. That's how each polling location is set up. It's a bipartisan team. There's a chief judge and then party judges of either party of the major parties, and then assistants. So you'll meet your team, you'll set up your site and get ready for the morning. then you've got to be there at 5:30 in the morning and work all day long. It's a very long day. So you'll work till 7:30, and the law says that you can't leave the polling location. So you have to bring in your lunch and just be buddies with everybody all day long. It is a really intense day. And then afterwards, you have to pack up. And then if you are a chief judge, you have to bring back all of the supplies where you will do check-in at our warehouse. And that usually takes us till 11 o'clock or midnight. So it's a very, very long day. We appreciate everyone who does that.
Yeah, wow. Yes, indeed. And a couple other questions. Can a spouse be your absentee ballot witness?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we mentioned this before, but a question came in: how can I find out if my ballot was received by the Board of Elections?
So when your ballot's received and approved by the board, then you can go on to our website and see that. However, the State Board of Elections is starting something new that's more useful this election, and they are aiming to have this begin on the 1st of September. It's a system called ballot tracks. So once they have this up and going, once we check in your ballot, you'll be able to go to the ballot track system and see that we checked it in. You'll be able to see that we sent it out in the mail, and you'll be able to follow it through the process that way. So that's something that's exciting. The State Board will be putting out media about that once it's in place, and we will too. So you'll hear more about that once it gets off the ground.
Great, great. And there was a question about, will masks be required at election facilities, especially if I'm volunteering as a poll worker? How safe will I be?
So that's a great question. At the polling locations, poll workers are required to wear masks. We also have face shields for you if you want those. We'll have full PPE, so masks, hand sanitizer. Each check-in station will have the plexiglass shield, and then cleaning supplies for cleaning all of the equipment between each voter. So for voters, when they come to the polling location, North Carolina has required that we turn no one away. So if somebody refuses to wear a mask, then that is something that they choose to do, and we can't turn them away. However, we really encourage people to wear masks, and to that end, when you are greeted at a polling location, we will ask you if you want hand sanitizer, and we will have a mask there for you, and we'll encourage that that be worn. And then you'll also get a single-use pen that you'll use through the process. And like I said before, the voting equipment will be cleaned before and after use by each voter. And for poll workers, the locations are cleaned before and after as well.
And just a question that came up in our conversations a while ago: what if an early voting site, what if a staff member test positive for COVID? What's the response for that site? Are they going to change sites? How do they handle that?
Yes, so that is actually something that our board is deliberating on right now, and we'll pass at a board meeting a plan for that. But I suspect that this will be taken on an individual basis, and that with early voting locations, we have the ability to completely shut one down because we have so many sites. If we need to do that, we could do that. And on election day, we will have backup polling locations so that if something like that happens there, we could switch that way.
Great, great.
Yes,
I think this
is very important that we don't become a place to spread the coronavirus.
Absolutely. And I have a question for Chris, Dr. Cooper. The question is there straight party voting in North Carolina? And if so, what percentage of voters actually vote straight party ticket?
we used to have like a traditional straight party, but the kind of traditional front to bottom straight party is not here anymore. So, and I can I just hop in on one thing real quick too, and just brag on Buncombe County for a second, if it's all right. So somebody asked a question before about what happens to ballots when they come in. If they're wrong, do they get called or returned? And Corinne gave a great explanation as to how they do that. But I've been spending a lot of time on a research project looking at ballot curing, so the process of doing that. And there's a lot of discretion across counties for how they handle this. And Buncombe's sort of curing rate is one of the best, if not the best in the state. They're turning these things around like the next day. So it's pretty remarkable to watch just from a data geek perspective, what a good job they're doing with that. So.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. The one other one, Corinne, for you, they're hearing about poll watchers. What are they and what are they able to do?
So poll watchers, and there's various things that people mean when they say poll watcher. So there's really two things that happen at the polls. One is that there are people who come and they stand outside the polls. We have a 50-foot zone where people like campaigners and anyone really at a poll cannot go within that 50-foot zone. And there are people there who are observing the voting process and they're reporting. And we're in contact with a lot of those groups and they're very helpful. They'll call us up and alert us to problems and we can take care of them. So that's one way of poll watching. And then there is a more official option called observing. So observers are allowed in the polls, but there is a process where you are appointed by the parties to be able to go into polling locations. And there's two types of observers. There's an at-large one that can kind of float around the county or state. There's even state observers that can float around. And then there are our local ones. If you're that type of observer, you're allowed to be in the polling location, but you cannot ask questions or interfere with the voting process. So well, you can ask questions, but there's no interfering with the voting process. And that means if you're bothering the poll workers too much, that's interfering. But you are there to observe, to take notes, anything like that to make sure that the voting process is going well at all of our locations.
I had one more question on the absentee ballot. What's the signature matching process?
Okay, so the signature matching process is that, so in all of the forms that a person has ever given to Buncombe County Election Services get scanned into our system. And we can see all of the signatures on there. And so when a ballot comes in, we visually, we're not handwriting experts. So this is just one of the many processes that we use to verify a ballot. We also make sure that the identity information matches, that the address is the same, all of those things. So this is just one piece of it, but we just visually look to see that that signature looks like the one that is being turned in for whatever it is, a registration form, an absentee request form, the actual ballot.
Awesome. You're getting lots of shout outs out there too. So I just want to pass those out. So look in the Q&A box so that you can take in the accolades that are coming for you. So I'm really super glad that you and Chris are here this morning. Again, folks,
a great team here, and I want to give Trina some credit for that too. She was here for 25 years and built a really great team. 2020 was an extremely I knew it would be a challenging year to begin as director, but I didn't know that there would be these extra pieces in here. So I'm so proud of our team. We definitely have a great team. There's one more thing that I want to say that's new that the state board is doing that's coming along. I know we're running very low on time now. But
we got a few more minutes. We got 20 more minutes. We're good. We're going to 10:30, so you guys are fine. Relax.
Fantastic. So the absentee ballot requests have traditionally all been on paper, and that's what they are right now. Along with that ballot track system, the state is hoping to put out on September 1st a absentee request online that you can do. And why that's exciting to me is that that will really speed up our process. So right now, when a form comes in, it's a manual entry. That form comes in, we scan it into our system, and then we have to manually enter the data. If you do it online, it will be able to come in electronically. It'll speed up our system, and we can review from there. So that's coming. If you haven't submitted your request, you might consider doing it that way.
And how much voter fraud do we usually experience in North Carolina?
Oh, I bet Chris has those statistics right off.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I can give you the statistics pretty quickly. Pretty close to this number, pretty close to zero. So voter fraud is one of these things that a lot of folks talk about. The hard part about talking about this is the best example we have of voter fraud in the country came from North Carolina, right? It came from this ballot harvesting that happened in Bladen County in the last election. So the retort is usually, but what about Bladen County? And it's a very good retort. I think I'm satisfied personally that the state board and everybody else is taken a lot of steps to make sure it doesn't happen again. And I think it's also worth pointing out that the way the Bladen County, if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you Google Bladen County voter fraud, you'll have enough hits. But the fact that our state board of elections makes data so public meant that this was really easy to track and figure out, right? You could figure out pretty quickly that one candidate was getting 99% of the mail-in votes for him. And it didn't take a lot to actually track down that voter fraud. So although that was an example of voter fraud, I would point out it's an example of caught voter fraud. The studies, well, when you see headlines about voter fraud in North Carolina, there was some that came out that said, hey, look at all these double voters on the rolls. But the reality is, well, take me, my name is Chris Cooper. Turns out there's a lot of Chris Coopers. There's also a lot of Chris Coopers with my same birthday. So a lot of times when people first do these quick cut analyses, they'll say, hey, there's 5 Chris Coopers that were born, August 12th. Therefore, that must be the same person. And the reality is we're all different people. There's another one who plays the guitar much better than me who lives in Asheville. There's another one who's a locksmith in Macon County, and there's another one in Jackson County. So the real evidence of voter fraud is bordering on zero.
Yeah,
great, thanks.
And we do have a lot of checks. So, something that you can take comfort in North Carolina is that we're all paper ballots. And so we have that tracking system. When you vote, we do audits constantly. So we have the audits, pre-audits during voting. Each day after early voting, we audit those. We make sure that what shows up in the computer is what matches the number of ballots we have, is what matches what's on the tabulation machine. The tabulation machines are offline. Those are never online. So they're not accessible through the internet. We have bipartisan teams at the polls. So there's people from both parties and unaffiliated watching the process. Our voting systems are certified. And we do audits, and we have an investigation team. So we do local audits here, and then the state board also does audits and looks for those anomalies that Chris was talking about.
Just a couple more questions have come in as well. Can an absentee ballot be forwarded? For example, an elderly parent has moved in temporarily. Can it be forwarded from, say, Deerfield?
Like forwarded through the postal service?
Yeah, that I'm going to need more help. That's a question from Pat. Pat, if you want to type some more and give us a little more understanding. I'm wondering if it's probably from an out of state, but you can certainly request an absentee ballot from out of state.
Yes, absolutely. And if we don't answer questions clearly here, you are definitely welcome to email us and call us. In regard to the first question that I couldn't answer, or that I didn't have the answer to right away too, it did bring up a point that at every in-person voting, there is what's called provisional voting. So if you came to the polls and you were sure that you were eligible to vote, and the system said, nope, you're not, then you have the right to vote a provisional ballot. And those ballots get reviewed like you wouldn't believe. That is one of the biggest things that we do after an election. After an election, most people, when election day is done, they feel like it's over, but we have 10 days of certification that we do after that period. And one of those is those provisional ballots. So if there's ever any question, you can vote one of those, and we will research it extensively.
And one other with that, I think you've answered this, but just want to double check and remind folks, how do they track or tell that if they're voting early? How can you tell if your vote was counted?
If your vote was counted, if you voted early.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a way to track that?
So after the election, that's when everything is certified and voter history is applied, and you can go to that voter lookup tool that I talked about, and you can see, and it's really interesting if you haven't been there, you can go and you can look and you can see every election that you voted in on there, and primaries and everything. So you can look there and see that your vote was counted.
Okay. And Chris, you had mentioned this earlier, and Corinne, you may be able to answer as well, that, a lot of the students, especially the college students, are in this mix of online classes and a few that are still in person, and some of our universities and institutions have moved to all online. Where do they vote?
So I'll answer that one. So students have always had the option to decide whether they vote at their home, their previous home, their home, or their at their university. And residency is based on domicile, so that means where you intend to reside. So if a college student thinks that they're going to stay in Asheville, then they can vote in Asheville. If they're not sure, they can use their address at home.
Great. And Chris, we have a question for you. Can you comment on the voting trends between 2016 and 2018 in Western North Carolina with regard to what 2020 might look like?
Yeah.
Told you somebody would want you to make a prognosis.
Yeah.
It's that Nostradamus piece of yours.
That's right. Yeah. I don't know. Let's see here. So yeah, it is great question, Bruce. Thanks. So, I mean, in general, Western North Carolina is this weird and interesting place, right? We're the region of the country, of the state that went the most for Bernie, and we also went the most for Trump, right? So trying to understand, wrap your head around that for a second. So as far as the trends and what we can expect, I mean, if we look at the 11th Congressional District, again, this is on paper, the lay of the land doesn't look like it'll be that competitive. With that said, the Cook Political Report, for example, just moved it from strong Republican to lean Republican, meaning it looks like a more competitive race. And obviously, there's been a lot of controversy over Cawthorn in particular over the last few weeks. And so I think that one is going to be an interesting race to watch as far as what the demographics of the region, what you said before, the voting trends would seem to suggest that, of course, Davis will do great in Buncombe County. He might do well in Jackson County, but that the rest of the district will be tougher to pull. But obviously anything could happen. At the General Assembly level, the most competitive in the region is probably expected to be the 119th State Legislative or General Assembly District, which is, Swain, Jackson, a little bit of Haywood County. That's Joe Sam Queen versus Mike Clampett, round 4. So this, if you're a Rocky fan, this is the Drago movie. So that one is kind of a R plus 2 or 3 district. In other words, Republicans are slightly favored by the lay of the land, but Joe Sam Queen's raised a lot more money than Mike Clampett. And we've seen in migrants, of course, to Buncombe County, we've got these really interesting Buncombe County Commission races on the ballot as well. And so I think Buncombe County has certainly gotten bluer, and Jackson is this interesting purple dot, and most of the rest of Western North Carolina has gotten a little bit redder.
Great, thank you for that. And I don't know, Corinne, whether I may be making it more difficult in terms of the questions, and somebody wanted to clarify that point you were making. If you vote absentee, you cannot verify your vote was counted until after the election. You can only confirm whether your ballot was accepted and processed. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, that it was accepted and processed.
Okay. All right, good. Hopefully we've got that.
And that's because, no results are counted until election day. That's just the law.
Right. And then there was one in here that from Janet, the Citizen Times letter to the editor suggested that all states work together to release election data a week to 10 days after election day so that all the votes are counted before the races are announced. Is that reasonable or possible?
Could you repeat that again?
Sure. In the Q&A box, in the Citizen Times letter to the editor, they suggested that all states work together to release election data a week to 10 days after election day so that all the votes are counted before the races are announced. And the question is that even reasonable or possible? I think it ties in with the uptick in so many absentee ballots, and we all know that it's a longer process to count those.
I see.
But by 5 p.m. or 7 p.m. that evening, they're already starting to call races.
Yes.
Throughout the state and the nation. So
this is a very good question, because this happens differently in different states, and that's why I didn't understand it at first. So in some, we're accepting ballots starting as soon as people start getting them back to us after the 4th, and we're processing them the whole time. In some places that's not what happens, and that does happen after election day, and those get counted after. In North Carolina, there's very few that will be counted after. So those will be the ones that are postmarked on election day and that come in on time. We'll take care of those. We'll also take care of all of the provisional votes, which for a presidential election tend to be under 2,000. So not very likely to change a race. But yes, that is what that process, that period is for. So from election day, on election day, nearly all the votes are in. But there are the straggling absentees and the provisionals, and those will get counted, and all of the auditing happens. We do a sample audit to make sure that everything was handled properly at the polls, that the machines were working properly. We do that afterwards. And then our board actually certifies the election. So that happens on November 13th. So that's actually a really exciting day for us. If there are people who are really interested in the elections, attend our board meeting on that day. We tend to be very happy on that day.
I imagine November 14th. Yeah, I imagine November 14th starts a little vacation period for some of you guys.
It does. We have been on, turned on high early this year, and we have a lot of time left. So we do look forward to a little time off. But
I equate that to the CPAs right after April 15th. It's like, oh, thank God it's done. Well, I really appreciate both of you joining us this morning. It has been fabulous to have you here, and great information. Just really appreciate you taking the time. I know how busy you are, especially right now. Dr. Cooper, with classes starting and the whole online thing and switching those things around, plus the middle of the election. Corinne, with everything that you've got on your plate right now, you're doing a fabulous job, and really thank you for taking time to join us this morning. It's been wonderful having you here, so I really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
We appreciate it. Having the right information out there is what we need.
And just want to touch one more thing, just a little bit of a second topic that's not right here, but it's happening at the same time. The census. I know the census stuff goes out, and I think people get confused around, is this about voting? Is this about absentee ballots, or is this something different? And if you want to speak to that real quickly, Chris or Corinne, because I know right now our numbers are not good.
I can start and Corinne can pick up what I mess up. Yes, our numbers are not good. So I saw a question about that. Yeah, it's incredibly important, right? If things go the way that they should go, we should have another member of Congress. We should move from 13 to 14 congressional seats in North Carolina. But right now, our census return rates are, as I think I put in the chat, in a word, bad. And the last time I checked, the 11th congressional district, so most people on this call, have the lowest return rates in the state. We were kind of neck and neck with one of the eastern districts. So I think it is, not I think, it is a real problem. And local Asheville plug Blake Esselstyn, who some folks may know, has a really helpful blog that has all sorts of things about redistricting and voting rights. And he had a really nice piece the other day on the relationship between the pandemic, census, and redistricting. And so if you're interested in those issues, if you like to delve deep, I'd encourage you to find that. Email me if you have trouble Googling it. But Corinne, I don't know what you wanted to add. That
Yeah, it's important. The census data is what a lot of things are based on. So, you know, we are speaking to voting right now. I think that's pretty obvious that your representation is determined by that. And this is a little out of my wheelhouse, but the all kinds of things, funding for the county and for schools and for all of that is based on those numbers too. So it's very important that you are counted in that way.
And I think people need to realize too that there is an economic impact to that.
Yeah,
The funding that we get, there's a lot of funding that we get that's based off the census number. So if we're not counting everybody, I think Lillian posted in there, at least to all the panelists, that 1 in 5 households have not completed the census in North Carolina, and the state is looking at losing $1.5 trillion in funding because of that underrepresentation. That's huge. Yeah. So please don't get confused that, you know, people aren't asking you for who you're voting for now. The census really is important. And I know there's lots of reasons why people ignore that or don't do it, but it does cost us a lot.
And I did it. It took me minutes.
Yeah. It's very easy to do. Great. Well, again, thank you both for joining us this morning. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. Again, thanks to everybody on the webinar who joined us as well. Appreciate you coming and joining and taking time with us this morning. I hope the information was helpful to you. With that, I'll say thanks and goodbye. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
See ya.